This is Jeff Oak, and welcome to Taking Care of Your Business, conversations to support small and medium-sized businesses. Today, I'm delighted to have Roy Ryniker join us for an interview. Roy is the president of Reorganization Alternatives Group, based in Garden City, and you're in for a real treat. Roy's going to share just some really cool stuff about the nature of the work that he does with companies. So, Roy, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Roy, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get to be doing what you're doing?
Okay. I could say my first assignment out of college, I was working for a company that was having some sales problems. And they asked me, I was the new kid, and how could I go about trying to do that, and started solving problems. Okay. And then from then on, I became a problem solver. Okay. In scope of my background in general, I've been the president of several middle market firms. I've also been a turnaround consultant in numerous firms across many different industries. And I've also been a board director. Okay. So I've seen organizations from many different angles. My background, I combine strategic, operational, and financial skills to try and help a management team create value. And in addition to my diversified business background, I have an economics degree from Harvard University. I have an MBA from Columbia University. I'm a CPA, and I'm a chartered financial consultant. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm a lousy golfer and I'm a mediocre tennis player.
Okay. Those are areas of your life that require a little turnaround, huh?
Yes, they do. My athletic career still needs a turnaround, yes.
Great. So tell us about Reorganization Alternatives Group. What sort of work do you do?
What we primarily do is go into an organization, and I call it help them create a vision of success. Okay. How do we define success, and what is the timeline that we create success? And many times when I'm talking to a management group, they really haven't thought that through. They're so busy doing the day-to-day work that they really haven't taken a step back and say, how do we define what we're really trying to achieve here?
Sure.
Sort of starts with the basic question, how do you cost effectively attract and retain a profitable customer? Now, that sounds like a simple goal to have. And I say a profitable customer, not chasing sales, but chasing profitable sales.
Right.
Getting a management team to try and answer that question. And sort of the process that we tend to use to get to that answer is, I call it a situation analysis. So first of all, I say the company itself. What is the overall company's operational capabilities, whether it's a product or a service? What does it deliver, and what is its capacity to deliver? The second major area is the customers. And it's not just of all the customers, but who are your better customers? How do you define a better customer? And then also, how do you say to yourself, how do I get more of this particular type of customer?
And a better customer is a more profitable customer, going back to your earlier comment.
Yes, but it's also a customer that has more upside potential.
Okay.
If you're selling to a customer and they buy, 10,000 widgets from you, which is a good thing, but their total purchase of widgets is 10,000. Your ability to grow with that customer is stinted. So right. You also want to target some of your sales and marketing initiatives to companies that you may be selling only 1,000 of widgets, and they're buying 10,000 from others. Right. And how you can base good performance. You already know that there's a market there. You don't have to create the market. Right. So you want a mix of customers that have that opportunity. But in analyzing the customers, you also want to look at who aren't customers. Right. What kinds of companies are not buying from you, and what do you have to do to make them a customer?
Sure.
And then I also challenge management groups to look at some customers who've left you over the last few years. And can you do an outreach to them and find out who are they buying from now, why are they buying from them, and why did they leave you? Many times when a customer leaves, nobody chases after them. They're just gone. Right. And really try and understand what are the barriers that customers have and why they don't buy from you.
Right. So you're really doing a very comprehensive analysis not only of current customers, past customers, and potential future customers.
Yes, but quite honestly, I'm not really doing the analysis. I'm creating the questions and the infrastructure for the management team to do the analysis.
I see. Got it.
We collectively create the answers. Roy doesn't take data and go sit in a room and come back with an answer, because I don't know their business as well as they do.
Right.
I never will. What I do is I put a structure around the kinds of questions that they have to ask themselves. And in going through the answers, then we create what the solutions are.
Right.
But in looking at customers, it's a hard thing to get people away from the fact that you don't sell a product or a service. You sell a solution. What is the reason somebody's buying whatever it is you're selling?
Right.
And try and really hone in on what are the areas from somebody having the capability to do that.
Right.
The other area is I call them your collaborators. Who makes your company better? Whether it's a supplier, whether it's professionals that you use, a marketing company, whoever, an advertising company, who do you draw on that makes you a better organization? And then ask, how can you get them to work with you better? How can you ask more of them to help you be more successful than who you are?
Right.
And the last thing is, you operate in a company in lots of environments. Those environments may be your internal workforce, the different markets where your salesmen operate, the different markets where you're buying product from. What are the dynamics going on in all those different markets that you have to be aware of?
Right.
It isn't so much what's going on today, but try and have a vision for where are these things going and how do you get in front of them so you're in a position to respond to that.
So really in analyzing those various contexts that define the business in which the business operates.
Yes, for sure. It's doing that context, but it's also, the plan isn't what we should do. Part of the plan is what should we stop doing? And asking the management team, what are certain products or services that you're offering today that you're not very good at, that there's low margin and low upside potential there, and maybe you should discontinue doing that. And I don't mean just go cut 10% of your staff. It's how do you turn around and say, what am I not doing well? What has a low outlook for margin and sales? Stop doing it and then redeploy those assets to what has greater upside potential.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense. So it's a great analytical framework. Can you flesh it out a little with an example or two?
Well, one thing is, I ask management teams to look at the reports. What do they use to manage the business? Now, the two most common reports are, I have my financial statement, and then I have a sales report. The financial statement tells you where you've been. It doesn't tell you where you're going. So you have to get deeper. What else are you using? And the sales report, 95% of the time, it's sales month, sales year to date, sales this year compared to last year.
Right.
That in itself isn't a dynamic report. If you want to have a good sales report, you should say, what are the sales by new customers versus existing? How well am I doing getting new customers? What product groups are the sales comprised of? And what are the margin of those different product groups? And then you also want to look at and say, in the report, what are we missing here? In that, it said, if you could really capture how much of the customer's total buy that you're doing, that in a sales report is a great indicator of where you should redirect your sales and marketing initiatives. If you have good customers and you're only 10-20% of what their total buy is of your product.
Yeah, I like that. An organization I was a part of, we had a phrase called wallet share. What's our wallet share?
It's that same type of thing, yes. But that is difficult information to get. It is. But if your salespeople are trained on how to ask for it, that's where you're going to get. You're not going to buy that information. You're not going to get it from others. A good source of information is your suppliers.
Right.
Who they're selling you a product. They're selling many others. Many times they're more than willing to talk to you about their other accounts. Right. Trying to demonstrate that they're really an industry player. Your salesman should spend time with your suppliers the salesman for your suppliers, and try and learn from the different accounts that they have.
That's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah,
So
the salesman needs to.
your suppliers have a different perspective than you do. They know your business well, but they're not part of your business. I really like that as a fresh perspective.
And that's it. The salesman, that takes a little convincing. Salesman is like, why am I talking to another salesman who's not buying? We're buying their product.
Right.
What you're trying to do is get industry knowledge from the sales.
Right.
That's the real reason why you're trying to do that.
Right.
The other thing is when you're talking to these salesmen like that, and you're understanding customers you don't have, but you'd like to have, you really want to drill down what's the impediment for that company buying from you, and try and get that from a supplier or your salesman. And don't just say price. Okay, is price a factor? Yes, it is. But try and understand beyond price itself. What is the impediment that you're putting before accounts that you would like to have?
Right. I love the analysis. So you do the analysis, and you've given an example of a different way, a more expansive way to think about sales, for example. So talk about how you implement solutions. I mean, talk about how we get from the analysis to the cure, the diagnosis to the cure.
Okay, a technology firm, quite honestly, that I was put in, the private equity ownership put me in as president of a technology firm. And my analysis of that, in my role as president, was trying to understand they had many products and a lot of different R&D activities. What I did was looked at all the major customers, tried to understand the upside potential of these accounts, how much we were selling and what was the real upside, and then the whole R&D efforts. What was the likelihood if we were successful with the R&D effort, what those sales and margin would be from those efforts?
Right.
And in doing that analysis, I determined that two of the major accounts, one was the United States Navy and the other was Boeing, and said, these are accounts that are buying a small amount from us. They have significant upside potential. So I redirected a lot of the research and development activities specifically to solve some of their problems. Right. We brought in their engineering teams from both firms. We got a real understanding of what they used our product for, what else they had needs for, what were their other problems. We then got our engineers totally reassigned to different kinds of product development. Now that took a while, but over the course of a year and a half, in doing that, our profitability went up dramatically and our sales went up dramatically. We had sales growth for many accounts, but the Navy and Boeing particularly, we had dramatic growth in sales, and it was very high margin profit.
So I'm imagining a question that someone might ask: how willing was the customer to share information about other needs that your firm wasn't currently addressing?
That's a great question, because it's not always easy to get, and sometimes you don't get it at all. But you're initially building off, if you've done something well for them, and if you bring them into your facility and show them your capabilities, then you're in a better position to say, hey, this is what we have, this is our engineering talent, our production capacity, etc. And therefore, they're more open to talk about what else their other problems are. If you go visit them and you're on their site, you're just a body.
Sure.
They don't see your total capital that you have. I try and present an organization to manage the capital, but it isn't, people think of financial capital. You really have four types of capital in a firm. You have the financial capital, the money. You have access to money. You have human capital, which is how good are your people, what can they do? Then you also have physical capital. What's the capabilities of your business, your machinery, your location, whatever it is, your distribution channels, your production capital, and then your intellectual capital. Well, maybe it's not just patents. People think intellectual capital, they think of patents. But what processes do you have? How do you source innovation? And then how can you show to potential accounts or accounts that you want to sell more of, hey, this is all the capital. I can redeploy this capital to solve your problem.
Right.
And when you can do that effectively, they open up more.
Sure. I love that differentiation about different kinds of capital, and your comment that intellectual capital isn't just formal, legally protected, but companies have great ways of doing things that they've really mastered, processes, problem-solving techniques. So I like the call out there. So do you want to share one more quick example? Because I want to get to dig in a little bit on some of the specific solutions, way you think about solutions.
Okay, well, I mean, another particular situation was a manufacturing firm that was losing a significant amount of money. Trying to understand why were they losing money. And quite honestly, it was analysis of the different product groups that they were doing. Which product groups did they incur significant losses on? And it wasn't just the loss, but what was the upside potential if we could do it better? And then we looked at the major product groups and said, some of these, not only are you incurring losses, there isn't much upside potential here because it's going to be too expensive to try and expand that. Discontinued that. Discontinued product. Companies losing money, and we cut sales. Now, ownership at the time is saying, like, wait a second, what is the plan here? But what we did was we said, well, look, it's not go in and cut 10, 20% of your staff. That isn't always an effective thing to do. But it's redeploying your people and your production capacities. We took this manufacturer and cut out certain products. The sales initially went down because we discontinued products, but we redeployed the salespeople, production, some engineers, and within 6 months we had the sales. We had recovered the sales we'd lost, but we had turned it around into a profitable enterprise. Sometimes that takes a little bit of spine in terms of the character of the management team when you're recommending that they reduce sales.
Sure. And a more expansive vision. Your comments bring to mind a CEO that I worked very, very closely with, and we were facing a significant budget shortfall. So everybody knew that we needed to cut. And in a private meeting, he said, Jeff, I'm not just talking about just cutting. We got to make investments. We just have to make them differently, and we need to make them smartly. It's your theme of redeploying capital that I really like.
And it's also many times in a management team, there's a core competency that led to the success of the organization. But over time, as market dynamics change, sometimes that core competency becomes a core rigidity.
Right.
And it becomes the impediment to change because, hey, this is what we do and this is how we grew the organization, which helped you get to where you were. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to help you get to where you want to be.
Yes.
And as part of that, there's also a set of hard questions to ask amongst the management team is at many levels in the organization, do you have the people with the skills that are going to get you where you want to go? Somebody could be doing a good job for you today, but they don't have the skill set needed to move the organization in a new area.
Right.
So an honest assessment, and it isn't just my underperforming employee, but you could have performing employees, but they're not going to be the team that's going to lead you to the new product, the new market. And you have to say, how do I redeploy that?
Right.
The same thing is for your performing employee. A lot of times they have institutional knowledge that is not easily replaced. So I always try and get management teams to do more training. Instead of just, if you have an underperforming person, try and set up some benchmarks for their improved performance. Give them some more training, especially if they've been with you for a while.
Right.
Because you don't easily replicate the institutional knowledge that's been built up, and try and get more from them. Now, the truth is, after the training period, and they're not improving, then you make the decision that perhaps they have to be let go.
Right.
But I've heard many times management say, the biggest impediment was the people they didn't let go.
Right.
Not the people they did.
Right. Roy, from our previous conversation, you talked about some of the key investments companies need to make. As we move toward closure, of this interview, what are examples of strategic investments to make once you've done this kind of analysis?
First, in terms of the technology, every company today is some kind of technology company. And I've been in management groups where the owner comes out and he shows me his brand new car that, that costs him $70,000 to buy, and it drives him to and from work. But he won't spend $70,000 on technology to drive his business, but he does to drive himself. Okay? Because sometimes there isn't a short-term return to technology investment.
Right.
You got to have it gestate for a period of time. So I'm always asking companies, what is your IT budget now? What do you think your IT budget should be? And what type of technology do you need in order to really drive what your business is?
Right.
The other thing is, as I mentioned before, training. There should be a plan at the beginning of the year for your management team. What specifically are we going to try and have them get better at doing, and what training? Whether it's internal training or send it from outside, bringing in a trainer. But we really need to define what training is for the management team for this year. And then also I say, who are your high performers at every level of the organization? Pick some of your stars. And how do we specifically create a training plan for those stars so we can help them advance in their career, but also give them a career outlook so they're less inclined to leave your organization.
It's such an important retention strategy.
Yes, but many times people don't do that in terms of, especially someone who's been in your organization 6 months. And if you see, hey, these people have real potential, you have to create a plan on how am I going to maximize them by giving them some more training.
Right.
The other thing is invest. I call it invest in communication channels. Now, this may be taking people to lunch. This isn't technology. This is people skill. How do you create in an environment amongst your employees a comfort level that they can disagree with the manager? Okay, many times people are hesitant to do that. There's a General McChrystal that said, he was running Afghanistan, and he was saying in his background in the Army, his bosses would tell him, disagree with me in a meeting. I want you to disagree with me because I want all the men to see that it's okay to disagree with the boss. That I'm not going to.
What a great leadership moment that is.
Yes, so you try and foster that. Now, sometimes you can try and plant it, but amongst your employees at all levels, you want them to not be comfortable with the status quo. I think Bob Iger, the former chairman of Disney, said it best. He said, the greatest risk we have is trying to maintain the status quo, not change. Maintaining the status quo is the risk.
Right.
How do you create employee dialogue at all levels of the organization to have them come forth with ideas and have them also be comfortable to say, I'm not comfortable with my manager. I'm not comfortable with the way we're treating customers. I'm not comfortable with we're treating each other, and learn from them.
Sure. And a word or two about diversity. You've mentioned that in our previous conversation. How does that come in?
In today's press, people talk diversity in terms of culture, race, religion. Yes, that's diversity, but I take a much broader point to that. I don't think you ever want to be too reliant on some customers, some suppliers, some marketplaces that you operate in, too much relying on anyone in particular in your management team. You want to be as diverse in all the different segments you're operating in. You want to have a conscious element for diversity. And as well as with the people, you like people from different backgrounds, especially if you understand your customers. You should have your staff and people working on your product development to have the same culture and background that your customers do.
Right. So
you can better understand what the person is, what their problems are, and how best can you solve what those particular problems are.
And a lot of attention. Yes. And with all of this, the devil's in the details, right?
It is. There's nothing too small. I mean, I've worked for firms where, the owner knows how many trucks made deliveries that day and what the time it was for that truck to be unloaded. In a company that does $100 million a year. Sometimes people use little metrics to see how it is that the company's operating, and they use different kinds of ways to measure it.
Sure.
I think just as important, I call them these portals of discovery, is what can you measure to see what's happening to your business that isn't so apparent, but you drill down and you see it change in your distribution channels,
Sure.
change in your supplier base. I mean, for instance, I was involved in a firm that was importing almost exclusively from China. And when President Trump's tariffs went into effect, this had a major economic impact on them. And they tried then to start diversifying out of it. Wasn't so easy to find new suppliers in other countries to do a filter on them. If they hadn't been so reliant on just China, then the Trump tariffs would have been less of an impact. Another indication of diversity, you try and get diversity in everything that
Sure. Roy, this has been a great conversation. I want to thank you for your valuable time, for the insights that you offer based on a lot of experience working with a lot of different companies. So thank you for joining us. We're going to add a link to the summary of this interview that if you're interested in learning more, you can click on that link and get more detail. Roy Ryniker, from Reorganization Alternatives Group, we thank you.
Thank you.